Hey y'all, it's been a while. I wanted to catch you up on life and the Periodic Paralysis Association conference and where I'm standing with my electrophysiologist appointment and the IUD situation. So I have a lot to catch you up on, but I hope that everyone is doing well. I feel like it's been forever since I've chat with you all. So let me know how you're doing in the chat, and let me know if you have any thoughts or questions that are spurred by this. If you want to continue to receive notifications about videos for this channel, hit that subscribe button, or like this video if you find it helpful. But I want to start by sharing about the Periodic Paralysis Association conference, which was absolutely amazing. If you have any interest at all in periodic paralysis, whether you're a medical student, someone who might be experiencing periodic paralysis, or you just have interest in the disease in general and in rare disease, I highly recommend going. I believe it's held every 2 years. This year it was held in Orlando. I think it usually is held in Orlando. And that is where my alma mater, UCF, is. So it was great to be back in Orlando and see how it's changed. And I got to go with my sister, and it was just an all-around great experience. So I'm really grateful that I got to go. Also, you might have noticed a kitty behind me, and that's Henry. So I am co-hosting a bit with Henry. But I wanted to share a few little nuggets that I took away from the Periodic Paralysis Association conference that I found applicable, in case you might have little anecdotes from your own life story that you might be able to relate to. I don't want to get too much into what was said during the lectures, because the Periodic Paralysis Association is actually going to be publishing those lectures for free on their YouTube channel and on their website, and I don't want to miscommunicate anything that they communicated during those, and so I highly recommend checking out their YouTube channel. It's the Periodic Paralysis Association, and their website. They have great expert advice, great insight, information about the therapies that are being developed for periodic paralysis, information that has resources if you are pursuing a diagnosis of periodic paralysis. There's a whole bunch of good stuff on that website, so I highly recommend checking it out. But I wanted to say, like, first of all, probably the best part of the whole conference was being able to connect with other people in person. Most of my experience with periodic paralysis has been with physicians and online virtually communicating with people that have periodic paralysis, are in the diagnosis process, or those have been diagnosed for a very long time. So for me, I think, like, in my personality, however you want to say that, like, for me, it starts to feel like very surreal and like outside of myself, I guess you might say, if I'm constantly like online chatting with people, but I never get to see them in person and talk to them in person. So for me, it was really important to have that personal connection. And I know that like COVID has made that really difficult in the past few years in general. So this was such a much needed experience, and I was able to talk to people who had such similar experiences, like battling through the diagnosis process. And I was sitting by this wonderful lady who had kids, and she's basically like trying to raise her kids as she's dealing with this, and one of her kids is also having symptoms. And I even heard from a paramedic who has periodic paralysis and who is considering how to transition himself basically into an early retirement, and what his career might look like if he's not a paramedic, and maybe going into teaching and that kind of thing. And there was a firefighter who spoke to that, and his own experience in having to retire because of his symptoms. And that really hit close to home for me because I had wanted to become a paramedic for a very long time. I started going to school for it, and that's kind of one of those thoughts that crosses my mind every now and then now is like, what if I had pursued that? Like, and now it's kind of a relief that I didn't, but I know for me it was so heartbreaking. Like when my symptoms first started getting really bad, it was so heartbreaking. I think a lot of my identity was placed in that kind of job, and I think emotionally for me, I really value being there for people, and I love like learning about medicine and the body, if you can't tell from my channel. And I love just like helping people in that way and being there for people. And so it was really hard when I took a step away from that. And I think sometimes it's even hard now, but I'm grateful that I didn't, because especially now that I'm having more cardiac symptoms, like I question whether I would have survived that kind of job, you know? So it's kind of scary to think about in those terms. There was a family who had traveled all the way from Australia. They had traveled 21 hours by plane to get to this PPA conference, and hearing their story about what they had been through was just incredible. Like, this family is so resilient and inspiring, and I was so inspired and encouraged by the people there that were younger than me, especially, like just seeing their energy and how they approach their lives, and when they were sharing about their own lives, like it was just so refreshing. Like that was good for my soul to see, and it just kind of like restored my faith in humanity in a lot of ways. I think also just the experience of going to a hotel and having customer service. I feel like customer service has been so different ever since COVID, and I feel like we're all having to help each other out, but to be able to go to a hotel and like being waited on was really nice. And I got to spend time with my sister, which was amazing, and that can be really hard for us to coordinate schedules on, and so it was a really good time. Some of the other things that stood out to me, I'm going to refer to my notes. Like, we got these cute little notebooks from the PPA. They're so cute, and they have this like little holder for like pins and stuff. I thought it was so cool. Let me see, where do I want to start? Oh, this is a really good tidbit, and I think this is like a recent kind of understanding for periodic paralysis, and that's that a lot of like, when I started learning about periodic paralysis, the main descriptor for the symptoms and the primary symptom to kind of distinguish periodic paralysis from other conditions was defined as episodic muscle weakness, which is very different from the name. The name is a bit of a misnomer. A lot of people who have periodic paralysis don't experience actual paralysis. A lot of people just have weakness that comes and goes. And something that was brought up during the conference was that some people actually will not experience weakness until like their 40s or 50s, like later in life. And then it won't even necessarily be like a hugely severe thing. Some people like will have very severe attacks of weakness, but others will have more difficulty, say like standing from a seat or like going upstairs. And so for them, the muscle weakness might not even be a very obvious thing, which is why we're trying to raise awareness about this condition, is that it can be really difficult for patients in and of themselves to recognize that they're having symptoms. So that was something that really stood out to me. Let me see. I also learned that andersen-tawil syndrome, which is a subtype of periodic paralysis. So if you're new to periodic paralysis, there are 4 subtypes. There's hypokalemic periodic paralysis, where potassium can kind of go low. There's hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, where potassium can go high. There's thyrotoxic periodic paralysis, where there's involvement with the hormones. And there's andersen-tawil syndrome, which is made up of a triad of symptoms in our current knowledge of it. It's cardiac symptoms, primarily ventricular arrhythmias and like long QT syndrome, as well as physical traits. So you might have like a broad forehead, low set ears, wide set eyes. You might have a crooked pinky finger, webbed second and third toes. There might be like small jaws or recessed jaws, different kinds of dental anomalies. And the third part of this symptom triad is the episodic muscle weakness, which in this broader understanding might actually be kind of a later age onset of weakness. So when I describe those categories, I really recommend watching the videos about periodic paralysis from the periodicparalysis.org website, because they kind of clarify this better than I can. But I just want to say here that when I say that the potassium goes high or low, that's not a very scientific way of describing it, because you can actually have normal levels of potassium showing up on your serum potassium lab results, and you can still be having an attack. So a lot of doctors, that's part of the information that's out there. Doctors think that you have to have high or low levels like showing on your blood lab results, but that's not necessarily the case. In fact, a lot of people who have periodic paralysis report that even during an attack, their potassium levels are within the normal range. So that's something to be aware of. There was something else I wanted to say about that. What was it? Oh, there was a question that I asked about Andersen-tawil syndrome, and that is, can potassium go either low or high in Andersen-tawil syndrome? And the answer to that is yes. And the same person can experience both low and high, and that's to distinguish it from hypokalemic periodic paralysis, where in hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, where the person is one or the other, if that makes sense. I thought that was really interesting. I find that fitting for my symptoms, I guess. For me, I feel like I experience more hypokalemic episodes, but I do notice that if I'm fasting, like I haven't eaten in a while, like I tend to do mini meals, because if I go like longer than 2.5, 3 hours without eating, I start to have muscle weakness and I start to just not feel well. So I tend to do the mini meal thing, but they say that fasting is typically a trigger for hyperkalemic patients. So I found that really interesting. But yeah, so that was the information I found out on that front. Okay, so more information that I found out. I was really encouraged because there were multiple representatives like across different, pharmaceutical companies that actually have like subdivisions in rare disease, and they are like actively looking for ways to support patients in the rare disease community. And I thought that was super encouraging, because there was somebody there who actually has a form of periodic paralysis, and he works in a rare disease sector of one of these pharmaceutical companies. And it was just really encouraging to see that that those people exist, and that, you know, there's a lot of negative media surrounding pharmaceutical companies, but I really believe that there's a lot of great people that are trying to help in those sectors. And so that was really, really cool to see. Something I will mention here, because it's so important. There are certain anesthesias and muscle relaxants that are fatal, like can kill people with periodic paralysis. There is also really great information that Dr. Har is the anesthesiologist that was speaking to all of this medication and anesthesia and muscle relaxant information. He actually has slides posted on the PPA website from 2021 that can be printed out and taken to a doctor. He said that as long as you're meeting with an anesthesiologist before undergoing any kind of surgery or procedure that involves like these kind of medications, and you let them know that you have a neuromuscular condition or that you have periodic paralysis, they should know which kind of medications to avoid and to use. However, it's going to be different for every patient, especially depending on other medical conditions that you may have. They also mentioned that for those who may have already been genetically tested, whether it was through Invitae or another genetic test, one of the more recent mutations to be identified for periodic paralysis, which is the KCNJ5, has only recently been identified. So it might be worth considering getting your genetics retested to see if maybe that might be the mutation that you have. I don't know if I was tested for that one. It was not on the Invitae panel when I was tested, but it may have been on the whole genome sequencing, so that's something I need to look into. But yeah, it was amazing information. Dr. Cannon went into discussing the therapies that are currently being developed, which is very exciting to hear about. Like, I didn't even know, like, there's like gene therapy and also like medications being developed that can address potentially all 4 of the subtypes of periodic paralysis, and then they're also going to be looking for patients who are willing to do clinical trials to test out the use of this medication for periodic paralysis. So that's really encouraging, and yeah, it was really great to hear all that. So yeah, that was the Periodic Paralysis Association. They had fabulous food. I just want to note that, like, there was some concern about whether people might get triggered by the food, and I did notice there were quite a lot of people missing from the conference, like after lunch on the first day, and so I know that the gal sitting next to me had been triggered by what was served, but thankfully I don't have as extreme muscle weakness as somebody that's hypo or hyper, I think, but that makes it really tough for some people. But the food was fabulous. My sister and I went out and we had these like dessert places that we wanted to hit up, and I think those were where I was getting tripped up because sugar can be a trigger for me, and I had a lot of sugar on back-to-back evenings, and I was feeling it the next day. And I could still walk, and I still made it to the conference, but I was definitely feeling it. I was very slow moving at times, but that's okay. Like, sometimes I just take a hit because I just want to have my dessert. So that's that. But after the conference, I had the opportunity to talk to my periodic paralysis specialist, Dr. Jareth. I didn't mention this in the intro, but I'll just briefly talk about that appointment. It went well. She was able to get me fast-acting potassium chloride because, like, the insurance that I had previously did not cover it, and they wanted to charge like over $1,000 for like a month's supply of potassium chloride, which is insane. But now, thankfully, I guess it is covered, or I'm not sure if she might have listed it as a medical necessity. I don't know. But that was exciting, and I've been trying that, and it seems to be, it seems to be helping pretty much to the extent as the pills. So I'm grateful for that. I actually am waiting for my pill subscriptions to come through, so I've been using those quite a bit. But I also had the opportunity to see an electrophysiologist, and this doctor was fantastic. He admitted that he didn't know much about periodic paralysis, which I was a little bit surprised because I was told that electrophysiologists are more knowledgeable about periodic paralysis, and he said that he didn't know much and he had read about it like the night before our appointment, which I was grateful that he even, looked into it, because that, doctors are very busy, so that says a lot. And he was very, very kind, listened really well, asked great questions, and seemed really willing to learn. And he said outright that he wanted to take my cardiac symptoms seriously, especially considering my family history of cardiac issues. And he is also interested because, this is something I forgot to mention. During the appointment with Dr. Jareth, I asked whether genetic, like raw data from 23andMe and Promethease might be helpful in genetic research to identify new mutations, because my report from Promethease identified mutations on KCNJ2 and KCNE3 that were not noted in my previous genetic testing, which I thought was interesting. So I thought, why not ask her about it, It couldn't hurt. And she said, never say never, and said that she's going to connect me with the genetics counselor there. So I'm interested to see about that. But connecting that with the story with the electrophysiologist wants me to keep him in the loop about the genetic test results there. We are going to do a 30-day Holter monitor, which I have done a Holter monitor before. I don't think it was 30 days, but to see if we can pick up on anything. I've been sending so many Apple Watch EKGs and trying to learn how to read an EKG. It's really complicated, but very interesting. But I've been sending them to them because I was encouraged to do so. And during this visit with the electrophysiologist, I had literally the day of the appointment, I had tried out this app that I had heard a few good reviews on. It's the Quali app, Qally. I'm not being paid by them or anything. I started out with the free trial, and I am doing just like a month, as I'm also doing the heart monitor testing, just to kind of see like how it compares and to compare it to my results that I'm seeing on the Apple Watch, and to see if to basically have a second pair of eyes on the EKGs, because my understanding is that even doctors can vary greatly in their opinion of EKG readings and interpretations. So I've had some things like come up through the Quali reviews. I've had quite a few low voltage. I had some PACs, like premature atrial contractions, I guess. And I think there was something else, but I can't remember. I don't know. But I'm interested to see how that all comes about. The electrophysiologist said depending on how things go with the Holter monitor, I might consider having like an implanted loop recorder, which is a little daunting to me. I asked some folks in the support groups, and a lot of them said actually good things about it. I believe it can be it's a minor surgical procedure where they place a loop recorder under your skin, and it can record for up to 3 years. I don't know the implications for like the MRI and stuff about that, because I've had quite a few MRIs in my day, and I imagine I'll probably need more in the future. We'll see. But yeah, I'm intrigued about that. I have mixed feelings about it, but we'll see how it goes. I might not even need one. We'll see. And last thing I want to update you guys on, those of you who have had an IUD placed know that the timing of the IUD placement is supposed to be when you're on your period. I started my period on a Saturday, which is a little trickier to schedule because the OBGYN is not open on Saturday, and that's at the beginning of the weekend, so that gives me less days. Like, it's supposed to be placed within 5 days of starting your period, but my OBGYN is working me into her schedule, so I am planning to have the IUD placed on Wednesday. So if you're watching this when I post it, then it might have already happened, and hopefully I'll be catching you up on how that's going. So yeah, there's a lot going on right now, but I'm encouraged. I am intrigued, and I hope that this is helpful for you guys. If so, let me know below. If you have questions, thoughts, comments, I would love to hear them.